Sometimes, truth speaks through the smallest voices. When a 10-year-old girl stands before the judge and cries, "My dad is innocent, I'll prove it," every heart in the courtroom stops. What happens next will test not only the limits of justice, but the power of love between a father and his child. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me from which country and at what time are you watching this story? Sunday mornings in Asheville had a way of slowing the heart down. The air carried a faint sweetness of maple leaves and roasted coffee drifting from Hillcrest Diner on Maple Street, where the same regulars filled the same booths every week. Behind the front window, Ethan Collins sat across from his daughter Harper, who was tracing circles in a small notebook with the end of her fork. He smiled, watching the sunlight slide across her messy hair. "Dreaming again, Peanut?" he asked. She grinned without looking up. "I'm writing about a girl who finds lost things. Maybe she even finds lost people." Ethan chuckled softly, the sound blending with the hum of the jukebox. "That's a story worth telling." Their waitress, Miss Lydia, stopped by with 2 steaming plates. "2 short stacks, extra syrup, just how you like 'em." She winked at Harper and topped off Ethan's mug. "Morning, Honorable." "Morning," Ethan said. "Smells like heaven today." "And there smells like a raise if you finally take a day off," she teased before moving on. Across the diner, Mr. Boyd, the owner, was setting up his old Polaroid camera for his weekly Family Sunday photo. Each week, he picked a different family to pin on the corkboard by the counter. When he lifted his chin toward Ethan's booth, Harper clapped. "Dad, can we?" Ethan wiped his hands, smiling. "Sure thing, but only if you promise to stop hiding behind your notebook." "Oh." They stood by the window, the mountains hazy behind them, and the shutter clicked a single flash, freezing the warmth between father and daughter. "Mr." Boyd scribbled Collins' family, Oct 8 beneath the glossy print, and pinned it up among dozens of smiling faces. As they sat again, Harper noticed the photograph still glistening. "You think people remember those days, Dad? The days that feel perfect?" He stirred his coffee, thinking, "I think we remember because they don't last forever." And, outside, a pickup rumbled past. Church bells echoed from downtown. The town felt wrapped in peace. Ethan glanced at the worn briefcase by his side, the one that held every bill and hope he could manage. He was due back at the office tomorrow, a routine he rarely questioned. Yet something about the quiet morning made him wish he could hold on to it longer. "College one day," he murmured almost to himself. "Somewhere with trees like these." Harper looked up. "You'll come visit every weekend, right?" He smiled, hiding the fatigue in his eyes. "Every weekend and twice on Sundays." She laughed, and for a moment the sound filled every empty space inside him. When they finished breakfast, Mr. Boyd handed them a receipt, 9.32 amperes, M. Neat black ink beneath the diner's logo. Ethan tucked it absent-mindedly into his briefcase. Harper left a few coins in the tip jar, whispering, "Thank you." As they stepped outside, a gust of autumn air lifted the corner of the Polaroid still drying on the wall. Behind them, the camera's flash went off one more time, catching their silhouettes through the diner's window, an accidental second photo no one noticed. The mountains glowed copper in the sunlight. Ethan placed his hand on Harper's shoulder. "Ready to head home, Peanut?" She nodded, swinging her small backpack. "Race you to the car!" He laughed and let her win. The road from Hillcrest Diner curved lazily down toward their small apartment on Maple Street. The old blue sedan coughed each time Ethan shifted gears, but Harper hummed along with the radio anyway, an old country tune about coming home. She rolled down the window, letting the cool air brush against her cheeks. "Dad," she said suddenly, "do you think stories can change people?" He smiled, keeping his eyes on the road. "Good stories, maybe. The ones that tell the truth about us." The truth about us?" she repeated, pretending to jot it in her notebook. "Yeah," Ethan said softly. "About who we are, what we believe, and what we do for the people we love." When they parked, the sound of a neighbor mowing his lawn filled the quiet street. Harper ran ahead up the porch steps. Their home wasn't big, 2 rooms, creaky floorboards, and a tiny kitchen that smelled faintly of cinnamon from yesterday's toast, but to her, it was a castle. She dropped her backpack near the door and turned on the kettle the way her mother used to, careful and slow. "Hot chocolate?" she offered. Ethan laughed, loosening his tie. "You read my mind." While the kettle whistled, Harper climbed onto the counter to reach 2 chipped mugs. She poured carefully, handing one to him with both hands. There, perfect sundae. He took it, touched by her small pride. You've got your mother's way of making simple things matter. The mention of her mother gone since Harper was 4 floated between them like a gentle echo. Harper lowered her gaze.
Do you ever miss her?
Ethan nodded, watching the steam rise. Every day, but I see a lot of her right here. He tapped her chin gently. A smile trembled on her lips. Then I guess we both remember her. They sat by the window for a while, each lost in thought. Outside, leaves fell in slow spirals, brushing the porch rail before resting on the old welcome mat. The hum of the afternoon blended with the faint chime of church bells. Ethan reached for the stack of bills on the table, sorting them into neat piles. Harper noticed his brow furrow. Everything okay? He forced a small grin. Always, just numbers, Peanut. But the truth pressed heavier than the papers beneath his fingers. The company had been running audits for weeks, and his boss, Richard Monroe, had hinted that something was wrong with the books. Ethan had spent late nights rechecking every column, convinced a mistake would turn up. It hadn't. A soft buzz from his phone broke the silence. A text from Monroe. Come in early tomorrow. Need to talk. Ethan's stomach tightened. He turned the phone face down and ruffled Harper's hair. How about we take a walk before dinner? They walked to the end of Maple Street, where the sidewalk overlooked the valley. Asheville stretched below them, rooftops glowing like copper in the sinking Sunday. A train whistle drifted in the distance, long and low, and for a heartbeat the world felt perfectly balanced, as if nothing bad could reach them here. Dad, Harper said, leaning against him, you promise we'll always be together? He looked down, that question catching him unprepared. As long as there's breath in me, he said quietly. Harper nodded, satisfied. Then we'll be fine. Oh. He smiled, but his gaze stayed fixed on the horizon where daylight faded into the deep blue of the mountains. Somewhere inside him, an unease stirred, faint but insistent, like a whisper through the trees. When they returned home, Harper curled up on the couch with her notebook. Ethan watched her draw 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, standing beside a diner sign. Above them she wrote, "The Pancake Promise." He almost asked what it meant, but she was already drifting to sleep. He tucked a blanket around her shoulders, turned off the lamp, and stood in the doorway for a long moment, listening to her even breathing. The night deepened. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, and in that small, ordinary silence, Ethan felt both blessed and afraid. Afraid of losing the one thing that still made his life worth living. He walked to his desk, opened his briefcase, and slid the diner receipt inside a folder marked Monday. The digits 9, 32 amperes. M glinted faintly in the lamplight before the folder closed. Outside, a breeze brushed against the window, rattling the dry maple leaves. The world slept on in peaceful ignorance of what tomorrow would bring. When the morning came, the photograph on Hillcrest Diner's wall, father and daughter smiling beneath a banner of golden leaves, would still be there, pinned among the town's happy memories. And somewhere in its glossy frame, frozen forever in time, was the last moment Ethan Collins knew peace. Monday dawned gray and restless, the kind of morning when even the Blue Ridge Mountains seemed to hide behind low clouds. Harper woke to the smell of burnt toast and the sound of her father's shoes pacing across the small living room. Ethan had been up since before sunrise, his tie already knotted, his face drawn tight with thoughts he didn't share. "Morning, Peanut," he said, forcing a smile as she rubbed her eyes. "Your cereal's on the table." Harper yawned. "You're going to work early again?" "Just a quick meeting," he replied, buttoning his shirt. "I'll be home before you're done with homework." But even as he said it, he knew he was lying. The text from Richard Monroe still burned in his mind. "Come in early. Need to talk urgent." Outside, the world was still half asleep. Mist hung over the street as Ethan started the car. Harper stood barefoot by the door, hugging her stuffed rabbit. "Can we go back to the diner next Sunday?" she called out. He hesitated, then smiled. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." The car pulled away, tires crunching over wet leaves. Harper waved until the blue sedan disappeared around the corner, leaving only the echo of its engine and the smell of rain in the air. Hours passed. The house felt too quiet without him. Harper colored in her notebook, listening to the refrigerator hum. Around 10, a knock rattled the door. She froze, crayons slipping from her hand. When she opened it, 2 police officers stood under the awning, hats dripping from the drizzle. "Is your father home, sweetheart?" one asked gently. "No, sir. He's at work." Her small voice trembled. "Did something happen?" The officers exchanged looks. Behind them, a dark car pulled up. Clara Jensen Harper's aunt stepped out, her face pale beneath her umbrella. "It's all right, baby," she said softly, reaching for her. "I'm here now." Harper's heart pounded as the officer spoke quietly with Clara. Words floated past her like fragments of a dream. Embezzlement. Charges. Taken downtown. When the meeting settled, she ran to the sidewalk just as a police cruiser turned the corner, her father inside, hands cuffed, head bowed.
Daddy!
She screamed.
Daddy, what's happening?
The car slowed for a moment. Through the rain-streaked window, Ethan's eyes found hers. He mouthed the words, "It's okay." But nothing felt okay. Harper chased the car until her legs gave out, knees scraping the pavement. Clara caught up, pulling her into her arms. "Shush, sweet girl, let's get you inside." "No," Harper sobbed, shaking her head. "He didn't do anything. He wouldn't." Clara held her close, whispering into her hair, "I know, sweetheart. I know." That night, the house seemed larger and emptier than ever. Clara stayed. Making tea neither of them drank. The television murmured in the background the local news, calm and detached. Local accountant Ethan Collins, 43, was arrested this morning in connection with the disappearance of company funds totaling $80,000. Harper's hands trembled. She turned toward the screen and saw his picture, the same smile from the diner photo, now framed beneath bold letters, "Arrested in embezzlement case." She pressed her palms against her ears. "They're wrong. They're lying." Clara muted the sound, tears pooling in her eyes. "Sometimes people make mistakes, honey." "He didn't." Harper's voice broke, sharp and desperate. "He promised we'd be fine." Outside, thunder rolled over the mountains. Inside, the clock ticked toward midnight, each second louder than the last. Clara led Harper to bed, smoothing her hair back. "Try to sleep. Tomorrow, I'll take you to see him." But Harper couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, tracing shapes in the shadows, the outline of her father's smile, the glow of the diner window, the promise of another Sunday that now felt impossibly far away. When she finally closed her eyes, she dreamed of pancakes turning cold on a table no one would ever sit at again. Morning came pale and quiet. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of wet pavement and rust. Harper sat at Aunt Clara's kitchen table, legs swinging, watching the steam rise from a mug of cocoa she hadn't touched. The house felt too neat, too still, nothing like home. Clara moved about the kitchen with gentle efficiency, folding a dish towel, checking her watch. "We'll visit your dad later this afternoon," she said softly. "The lawyer will meet us there." "Is he scared?" Harper asked. Clara paused, her hand resting on the counter. "I think he's worried," she admitted. "But he's strong. Like you." Harper nodded, though her throat ached. She glanced at the window, where a leaf clung stubbornly to the glass. It looked as if even the trees didn't want to let go. Around noon, Clara's friend, a man named Tommy Keller, arrived with a leather briefcase and nervous eyes. "Mrs. Jensen," he greeted, shaking Clara's hand before lowering his voice. "They're holding Ethan on probable cause. The company's audit shows money wired to an account in his name." Harper's small head jerked up. "That's not true!" Tommy looked startled. "Hey there, kiddo. You must be Harper." He crouched beside her chair. "I know this is confusing, but I'm going to help your dad, all right?" "How?" she whispered. "You don't even know him." Tommy hesitated, then smiled sadly. "Sometimes we help people because we should, not because we know them." Clara ushered him toward the living room. "We'll talk over here, Harper. Why don't you draw something nice?" But Harper didn't draw. She slipped quietly into the hallway, the soles of her socks making no sound against the wood floor. From the crack in the door, she heard Tommy's low voice. "If he pleads guilty, they might go easy. 3, maybe 5 years. But if he fights it," Clara's voice trembled. "He says he didn't do it. Ethan's not that kind of man." Tommy sighed. "The evidence says otherwise. Transfers match his ID, his computer login. It's bad." Harper's chest tightened. She backed away from the door, pressing her hands over her ears. "They're wrong. Everyone's wrong." She ran to her father's old briefcase sitting by the couch, the one the police hadn't taken. Inside were papers, receipts, and his lucky fountain pen. She flipped through them until one caught her eye. The diner receipt, Hillcrest Diner, dated Sunday morning, 9:32 amperes. M. The same time she'd seen him across the booth, laughing, pouring syrup. A tear slid down her cheek. "He couldn't have done it," she whispered. She folded the receipt and tucked it into her notebook, where she kept her stories and drawings. The paper crackled like a secret waiting to be told. That night, Clara tucked her in again, humming softly. "Tomorrow, we'll go see him, okay?" Harper stared at the ceiling. "Aunt Clara, if everyone says something that isn't true, does it make it true?" Clara's hand paused midair. "No, sweetheart. Truth doesn't change just because people stop believing it." Harper nodded, eyes glistening. "Then I'll make them believe it again." When Clara turned off the lamp, the room sank into darkness, except for the soft glow from the streetlight outside. Harper lay still, her small fingers resting on the notebook beneath her pillow. She could feel the receipt pressed inside, like a heartbeat against the paper. Outside, thunder grumbled again over the distant mountains, and the wind swept through the pines with a low, steady sigh. Harper whispered into the night, "I'll prove it, Daddy. I promise." The rain returned before dawn, tapping softly against Clara Jensen's window. Harper lay awake on the fold-out couch, listening to the steady rhythm, tracing each sound like a heartbeat. The small living room smelled faintly of laundry soap and the cinnamon candle her aunt always lit when she was nervous. Clara moved quietly in the kitchen, the shuffle of slippers on linoleum. "You want some toast, sweetheart?" she called. "No, ma'am. I'm not hungry." Clara appeared in the doorway, holding a mug of coffee between both hands. The steam blurred her glasses. "We'll go see your dad today, just like I promised. The lawyer will meet us at the station first." Harper nodded, hugging her knees. "They still think he did it, don't they?" Clara hesitated, then sighed. Sometimes grown-ups believe what's easiest to believe. After breakfast, they drove through downtown Asheville. The courthouse clock tower rose through the mist like an old guardian. In the car, Harper's reflection stared back at her from the rain-streaked window, small, determined, frightened. Inside the visitor's room, the smell of disinfectant filled the air. Ethan sat behind glass, pale under the fluorescent light. When he saw his daughter, his face broke into the faintest smile. "Hey, Peanut," he whispered through the receiver. Her voice quivered. "They said you took money, Daddy." He shook his head. "I didn't, Harper. You have to believe me." "I already do." She pressed her hand against the glass. His met it on the other side. For a moment, the barrier seemed to disappear. Tommy Keller entered then, damp coat clinging to his shoulders, legal pad under his arm. "Mr. Collins, I've reviewed the files," he said. His tone was kind but tired. "They traced the wire transfer to your account, unless there's proof you weren't at your desk at that time." Ethan exhaled, defeated. "I was at breakfast. With her." Tommy frowned. "Any receipts? Cameras?" Harper's eyes widened. She opened her notebook, flipping past doodles until she found the folded slip of paper. "Right here," she said proudly, pressing it to the glass. "Hillcrest Diner 9:32 amperes. M." Tommy leaned closer. "That's something," he murmured. "I'll check the timestamps. M." Clara smiled faintly, squeezing Harper's shoulder. "You did good, honey." Ethan's voice softened. "You always were my little detective." For the first time in days, Harper giggled, though tears still shimmered in her lashes. When visiting hours ended, she lingered by the door. "Daddy, what if they don't listen?" "They will," he said. "And if they don't make them." The words clung to her like armor as the heavy door closed behind her. She whispered them under her breath, testing their strength. Outside, the rain had stopped, but puddles mirrored the courthouse lights. Harper stepped over them carefully, her notebook tucked close to her chest. The world still looked gray, yet somewhere deep inside her, a spark had begun to glow. That night, lying beneath a borrowed quilt, she opened the notebook again. On a clean page, she wrote in crooked letters, "Find the truth. Bring him home." The pencil broke halfway through the word home, but she smiled anyway. Because for the first time since everything had fallen apart, She had something that felt like hope. The next morning dawned clearer than the last, a pale wash of sunlight spreading across the Blue Ridge slopes. Clara had already gone to school. Her first-grade class started early, and Harper sat alone at the small kitchen table with her father's briefcase beside her. The air still smelled faintly of coffee and pencil shavings, a quiet house where every tick of the clock felt like a challenge. She opened the briefcase again, smoothing each paper with careful hands. Most of it made no sense. Numbers, bank statements, official words printed too small to read easily. But tucked behind the folders, she found a note written in her father's handwriting. Truth doesn't hide. It waits for someone to find it. Harper folded the paper into her pocket. "Then I'll find it," she whispered. After lunch, she convinced Clara to drop her off at the Pack Memorial Library downtown. Clara hesitated. "You sure you'll be okay, sweetheart?" But Harper nodded. "I'm just doing schoolwork." The library was warm and quiet, smelling of dust and old paper. Rows of books stretched like the ribs of an ancient ship. Mrs. Latham, the elderly librarian with soft white hair, looked up from her desk. "Well, if it isn't Miss Harper Collins. Haven't seen you since the summer reading contest." "I need to look something up," Harper said. "About proving the truth." Mrs. Latham smiled. "That's quite the topic. Computer's over there, darling. I'll help you print if you need." Harper climbed onto the chair, her feet not quite reaching the floor. She typed slowly, one finger at a time. "How to prove someone innocent in court." Dozens of words appeared: evidence, witness, alibi. She whispered each like it was a secret spell. Hours passed. The sun slipped lower, painting the shelves gold. Harper printed out 2 pages about timestamps and proof of location. Mrs. Latham helped her staple them together. "Doing a report?" the woman asked. "Yes, ma'am," Harper said. "For someone who didn't do a bad thing." Mrs. Latham tilted her head but said nothing, just placed a small peppermint candy on top of the stack.
Then you keep going, dear. The world needs people who believe.
Harper thanked her and hurried out, clutching the papers and her notebook. The air was crisp, the sidewalks glittering with puddles that caught the light. As she passed Hillcrest Diner, she stopped. Through the glass, she saw Mr. Boyd wiping down a table, his camera hanging from his neck. She pushed the door open, the bell above it chiming softly. "Well, if it isn't my favorite writer," Mr. Boyd said. "You here for pancakes or trouble?" "Maybe both," Harper said. She climbed onto a stool at the counter, laying out the receipt. "Do you remember this?" He leaned in, squinting. "October 8th, 9:32. Sure do. I took your picture that morning. Do you still have it?" Her voice was small but urgent. Mr. Boyd nodded slowly. "Up there on the board." "Why?" Harper pointed. The photo still hung among dozens of others, 2 smiling faces framed by morning light. "Because that picture is the truth," she said. Mr. Boyd's brow furrowed. "You're saying that photo proved your dad was here?" She nodded, eyes bright. "He couldn't have taken the money if he was eating pancakes with me." The man studied her for a long moment, then walked behind the counter, pulling the Polaroid free. "You keep this safe, kiddo," he said, handing it over. "Sometimes the world forgets good men. Maybe you can help it remember one." Harper clutched the photo, heart pounding. Outside, the sun broke fully through the clouds, lighting up the wet pavement. She tucked the photo carefully into her notebook beside the receipt, the 2 pieces of paper fitting perfectly together like parts of a promise. When she reached the corner of Maple Street, she looked up at the courthouse rising in the distance, its clock hands glinting. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Justice begins when someone dares to speak." Harper drew a breath. "Then it starts with me," she whispered. The wind caught her hair as she walked on, the pages rustling softly under her arm, a sound halfway between a heartbeat and a vow. The next morning, Asheville woke beneath a pale gold sky, the clouds thin and high after the storm. Harper sat at the breakfast table, legs swinging, a bowl of cereal forgotten in front of her. The photograph from Hillcrest Diner lay beside it, edges curling slightly, the ink still bright. Clara poured coffee and watched her quietly. "You really think that picture will help?" Harper nodded. "It's proof, Aunt Clara. Daddy couldn't have stolen anything if he was eating pancakes with me." Clara sighed. "Honey, sometimes truth takes more than proof." It takes someone willing to listen. Harper's eyes shone. Then I'll find someone who will. She slipped the photo into her backpack, along with the diner receipt and her notebook. Before Clara could stop her, she was already halfway out the door. The air smelled of rain and pine needles as she hurried down Maple Street, sneakers splashing through shallow puddles. The courthouse clock struck 10, echoing over the hills. Harper turned toward downtown, her hair catching the wind like a small flame. She stopped first at the Pack Memorial Library again, wanting to make sure the papers she'd printed still made sense. Mrs. Latham smiled from her desk. "Back so soon, dear?" "I just need to check something," Harper said, spreading her pages across the table. She studied the words again. Timestamps, alibi, evidence, corroboration. The grown-up language made her head spin, but the idea was clear if she could show the judge that the diner photo and receipt matched the time of the supposed theft. Maybe they'd believe her father. When she looked up, Mrs. Latham was watching her kindly. "You remind me of myself when I was your age, always chasing the truth through books." Harper grinned shyly. "I'm chasing it for someone else." By early afternoon, she was back at Hillcrest Diner. The lunch rush had slowed, leaving the place smelling of syrup and coffee. Mr. Boyd was behind the counter, polishing a glass with his ragged towel. "Well, if it isn't our little detective again," he said, eyes crinkling. "Come to solve another mystery?" "Kind of," Harper said, placing the photograph on the counter. "I need to know if you still have the second one. The picture you took when we were leaving. The one through the window." Mr. Boyd blinked. "Second one?" "Yes, sir," she said earnestly. "You took another picture after the first. I saw the flash." He scratched his beard, thinking, "Well, I do keep all my prints in a box under the register. Let's take a look." He knelt down, rummaging through stacks of Polaroids bound by rubber bands. The bell above the door jingled as a customer entered, but Harper barely noticed. Her heart thudded with every photo he pulled out. "Here we go," he said at last, holding up a slightly darker picture of the diner window reflecting two shapes, a tall man and a little girl walking toward the street. Behind them, the clock on the wall clearly showed 9:32 amperes. Harper gasped. "That's it." Mr. Boyd studied it closely. "You're right, kiddo. That's a clean timestamp. How'd you remember?" "My dad said the truth doesn't hide," she replied softly. "You just have to know where to look." He smiled, sliding the photo into a paper sleeve. "You've got more heart than most adults I know." She tucked the photo carefully beside the first one in her notebook, her fingers trembling slightly. As she left the diner, a breeze swept down the street, sending a few leaves spinning past her shoes. The world felt wider now, full of clues, of possibilities, of courage she didn't know she had. She stopped by the courthouse steps, staring up at the tall columns gleaming in the sunlight. Somewhere inside, people decided what was true and what wasn't. And soon, she thought, they'd have to listen to her too. By late afternoon, Harper was back at her aunt's house, cheeks flushed from the walk and heart racing with excitement. She burst through the screen door, scattering the quiet hum of the living room. "Aunt Clara," she called. "You won't believe what I found." Clara looked up from grading papers at the kitchen table. "Goodness, Harper, slow down. What is it this time?" Harper laid the photos and the receipt neatly across the table like treasures. Mr. Boyd still had another picture, one that shows the clock on the diner wall. It says 9:32. That's when Daddy and I were eating breakfast. "Oh." Clara put on her glasses, studying the photo closely. "Well, I'll be. That's clear as day. And the clock matches the time on the receipt." She exhaled softly, a smile tugging at her lips. "Honey, this might actually matter." Harper's voice was barely above a whisper. "We can show it to Mr. Keller, right? Maybe he'll listen now." Clara hesitated. "He's not exactly easy to reach, sweetheart, but we can try." Harper grabbed the phone before her aunt could stop her, flipping through the lawyer's business card pinned to the fridge. She dialed the number with small, trembling fingers. After several rings, a tired voice answered. "Tommy Keller speaking." "Mr. Keller, it's Harper Collins," she said quickly. "I found more proof my dad didn't do it. A picture from the diner with the time showing, and a receipt." There was a pause. "A picture?" "Yes, sir, from that morning. The photo shows us at 9:32. The money was stolen at the same time from downtown. He couldn't have been in two places at once." On the other end, she heard rustling papers, then the lawyer's sigh. "Harper, that's actually important. If it's authentic, it could be your father's alibi." Can you and your aunt meet me tomorrow morning at the courthouse? Harper nearly shouted, "Yes, sir." Clara took the phone gently from her hand. "We'll be there, Mr. Keller. 9 o'clock sharp. M." After hanging up, Clara knelt beside her niece, her eyes misty. "I don't know how this will end, Harper, but I do know you've done something incredible." Harper smiled shyly. "Daddy always says, truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs someone to speak for it." That evening, as twilight fell across the quiet street, Harper sat by the window with her notebook open. The pages were full, now receipts, photos, scribbled notes about times and faces, all bound together by hope. Outside, porch lights flickered on one by one, the neighborhood settling into its evening rhythm. The sound of a distant train carried through the cool air, and somewhere far below, the courthouse bell struck 7. Clara's voice called softly from the kitchen. "Time for dinner, sweetheart." "In a minute," Harper answered. She took one more look at the photo, tracing the faint outline of her father's smile. For the first time in weeks, it didn't hurt to look at it. In her notebook, she wrote a new line beneath her earlier promise. "Tomorrow, they'll finally hear the truth." She closed the book, hugging it tight to her chest as if holding a heartbeat. And outside, the wind shifted a gentle whisper through the pines as though the mountains themselves were waiting for what the morning would bring. The morning came wrapped in fog, the kind that hung low over the Blue Ridge hills and softened every sound. Harper could see her breath on the way to the courthouse, her small hand gripping Aunt Clara's as tightly as she could. In her other arm, she clutched her folder, the photos, the receipt, and her notebook held close like armor. "Easy now," Clara whispered, adjusting her scarf against the cold. "You just keep your chin up. We'll tell Mr. Keller everything." The courthouse steps loomed ahead, tall and gray against the sky. Reporters stood near the entrance, murmuring about the Collins fraud case. Their cameras turned toward Harper for a moment, but she kept walking, her gaze steady. Inside, the hall smelled faintly of old wood and coffee. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to fill the silence. They met Tommy Keller outside room 4B. He looked less weary today, his tie straight for once, his eyes alert. "You brought the pictures?" he asked. Harper nodded, opening the folder. "Here, this one shows the clock. You can see me and Daddy, 9:32, the same time they say he took the money." Keller studied the Polaroid, his brow furrowing as he compared it to the printed statement. "You're right," he said softly. "This could change everything. If we can prove it wasn't altered, it's solid." Clara's voice trembled. "So, you'll use it today?" "Yes, ma'am," Keller replied. "But we'll have to be careful. The judge needs to hear it the right way." He looked down at Harper. "And you might have to speak." Harper's stomach flipped. "Speak? In front of everyone?" Keller nodded. "You saw the truth, Harper. That makes you a witness. I'll be right beside you." The heavy courtroom doors creaked open, and the world beyond them seemed to hush. Inside, the air was cool and still. People filled the benches, their voices low. At the front, Judge Whitmore, an older man with silver hair and clear, thoughtful eyes, adjusted his glasses and gavelled the room to order. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "Court is now in session for the case of the state of North Carolina versus Ethan Collins." Harper rose with everyone else, her knees shaking. Her father was led in through a side door, wearing the same orange jumpsuit she'd seen in every dream for months. When he saw her, his eyes softened pride, sorrow, love all in one look. He mouthed the words, "I love you," and Harper felt the courage bloom quietly inside her chest. The prosecutor, Mr. Hayes, stood first, his suit crisp, his voice smooth. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. Mr. Collins had direct access to the company accounts and transferred $50,000 to his own name. The state will show that this was deliberate and premeditated." Keller rose slowly. "Your Honor, the defense has new evidence, tangible, dated, and verified by witnesses which may prove Mr. Collins's innocence." Judge Whitmore's gaze sharpened. "Then presented, Counselor." Harper's pulse thudded in her ears as Keller walked toward the bench, holding up the Polaroids and receipt. "Exhibit D," he said, "taken the morning of the alleged theft, October 8th at 9:32 a.m. The defendant and his daughter were at Hillcrest Diner, miles from the scene. A murmur swept through the courtroom. The prosecutor frowned. "Photographs can be staged, Your Honor. Children are easily mistaken about dates." Keller turned to Harper. "Then perhaps she can clarify." The room went silent. All eyes turned to the small girl clutching her folder in the front row. Clara squeezed her shoulder gently. "You can do this, honey." Judge Whitmore's voice softened. "Miss Collins, please step forward." Quote. Harper rose slowly, her shoes clicking softly against the marble floor. She climbed the witness stand, her fingers trembling as the bailiff raised a hand. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," Harper whispered. When she sat down, the microphone loomed like a mountain in front of her. She took a breath and looked up at the judge. "My dad didn't steal anything," she said. "He was with me that morning. We were eating pancakes. Mr. Boyd took our picture, and the clock on the wall said 9:32. The crowd stirred again, whispers filling the space like wind through leaves. Judge Whitmore leaned forward. "Do you have the picture?" "Yes, sir," she said, holding it out with both hands. Keller brought it to the bench. The judge studied it carefully, then looked back at her. "And this is you?" "Yes, Your Honor." "You're certain of the time?" "Yes, sir. It's right there. You can see it." The judge nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Hayes, cross-examination?" The prosecutor stood, straightening his tie. "Miss Collins, you love your father very much, don't you?" "Yes, sir." "And you do anything to help him?" "Yes, sir." "So, isn't it possible," Hayes said gently, "that your memory is wrong? That maybe this picture was taken a different day?" Harper's voice trembled, but she lifted her chin. "No, sir. That was the morning of my spelling bee. Daddy promised pancakes before school, and he was late for work because of it. He said, 'Sometimes the truth can wait, but your kid can't.' He said that morning." A quiet gasp rippled through the courtroom. Even Keller paused, glancing at her in surprise. Judge Whitmore's eyes softened, the faintest flicker of admiration passing through them. "That's quite a memory, young lady." The prosecutor opened his mouth but found nothing to say. The judge rapped his gavel once. "We'll take a short recess." Harper exhaled shakily, her fingers gripping the edge of the stand. As the crowd began to murmur again, she caught her father's eyes across the room, tired, hopeful, alive. And for the first time, she realized she wasn't just speaking for him anymore. She was speaking for truth itself. The recess lasted only 15 minutes, but to Harper it felt like forever. She sat with Aunt Clara on a wooden bench in the hallway, her legs swinging nervously, the Polaroid photo clutched in her hands. The courthouse buzzed around her, reporters whispering, lawyers pacing, the echo of shoes against marble, but she heard only the faint ticking of the clock above the doorway. Clara brushed a strand of hair from her niece's face. "You did beautifully in there, sweetheart." Harper shook her head. "They still don't believe me. Mr. Hayes looked at me like I made it up." Clara smiled gently. "Truth doesn't always win in a day, but it always finds a way." Just then, Tommy Keller stepped out of a side room, holding a file in one hand and looking more alive than Harper had ever seen him. "The judge wants to hear more," he said. "We're calling Mr. Boyd as a witness." "Mr. Boyd?" Harper's eyes widened. "The man from the diner?" Keller nodded. "If we can prove that picture is real, not edited, your dad's case might just turn around." Minutes later, everyone returned to the courtroom. The judge called for order as Mr. Boyd took the stand, his diner apron folded neatly over his lap, hands fidgeting nervously. "Please state your name and occupation," Keller began. "Samuel Boyd, sir. I own Hillcrest Diner over on Maple Street." Keller nodded. "Mr. Boyd, do you recall the morning of October 8th? Mr. Boyd smiled faintly. "Sure do. That's the morning I took that picture of Harper and her dad. He just ordered pancakes for her and coffee for himself. They were sitting by the window, the one with the clock above it." Keller held up the Polaroid. "Is this the photograph?" "Yes, sir. That's mine. Straight from my old Polaroid camera. Never touched or edited." The prosecutor rose sharply. "Mr. Boyd, do you have proof that this was indeed taken that morning? Cameras can misprint dates." "Mr." Boyd adjusted his glasses.
"Maybe so, but not this one. That same roll had pictures from a customer's birthday party, and that party was on October 8th. You can ask anyone from town."
A murmur rippled through the gallery. The judge examined the photo again, eyes narrowing slightly, then turned back to Keller. "You may proceed." "Mr. Boyd," Keller said softly, "where is your diner in relation to the bank where the alleged theft occurred?" "Other side of town, Mr. Boyd answered. 15, maybe 20 minutes if you hit all the lights. Keller nodded, turning toward the judge. Your Honor, that would make it impossible for Mr. Collins to withdraw funds at 9:32 when he was at the diner. The time on the transfer logs matches exactly. The courtroom filled with whispers. The prosecutor frowned, flipping through his papers. Even if that's true, it doesn't prove who did take the money. Keller took a step closer to the bench. Not yet, but it proves who didn't. Judge Whitmore leaned back, folding his hands. Mr. Hayes, unless you have new evidence contradicting this alibi, I'm inclined to reconsider the motion for dismissal. Hayes swallowed hard. The state would like to call Mr. Richard Stone for questioning, Your Honor. A stir swept through the courtroom. Harper's eyes widened. She had heard that name whispered in every adult conversation since her father's arrest. The business partner, the accuser, the man her father once trusted. The bailiff opened the side door, and Richard Stone walked in tall, immaculately dressed, with silver hair that gleamed under the courtroom lights. He smiled faintly as he took the stand, but Harper could see at the flicker of unease behind his calm eyes. Keller began carefully. Mr. Stone, you were Mr. Collins's partner at Blue Ridge Financial? Yes. And you claim he transferred $50,000 without authorization? That's correct, Stone said smoothly. He was the only one with access to the account. Keller lifted a paper from the folder. And yet this email dated 3 weeks before the alleged theft shows you requested the withdrawal of your initial investment. Do you deny writing it? Stone blinked. I don't recall. The judge's tone sharpened. Mr. Stone, this email bears your signature. A hush fell over the courtroom. Harper sat on the edge of her seat, hardly breathing. Keller's voice grew firmer. So you admit you asked for the money back, but when the transfer occurred, you claimed it was stolen. Why would an honest man call his own withdrawal a crime? Stone's jaw tightened. Because it wasn't me. Then where were you that morning, Mr. Stone? Keller pressed. I don't remember, he said quietly. You don't remember the morning $50,000 disappeared? The silence was deafening. Judge Whitmore leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Mr. Stone, are you lying under oath? Stone's hands began to tremble. No, Your Honor. Keller's voice was steady now, almost gentle. If it wasn't Daniel Collins, and it wasn't you, then who was it? No answer. Harper watched the man's shoulders sag, his confident expression cracking like thin ice. I think, Keller said softly, you owe this court the truth. Stone looked down, his voice breaking. I just wanted to cover my debts. I thought no one would find out. I forged the signature. I'm sorry. The gallery erupted gasps, murmurs, tears. Clara covered her mouth. Keller closed his eyes in quiet relief. But Harper, she just stared, frozen in disbelief. The truth had finally spoken for itself, and for the first time in months, she let herself breathe. When the gavel finally struck, the sound seemed to echo forever. Judge Whitmore's voice carried over the noise, calm, deliberate, certain. This court finds insufficient evidence to convict Mr. Ethan Collins. All charges are hereby dismissed. For a moment, no one moved. Then the room erupted a wave of gasps, murmurs, and soft applause that rolled through the benches like a breaking tide. Harper stood frozen, her small hands trembling against the wooden pew. She looked toward her father, unsure if she was dreaming. Ethan turned to her, his eyes wet, and whispered her name. Harper. Before the bailiff could finish unfastening the handcuffs, she was already running down the aisle. The chains clattered to the floor as he knelt, and she threw herself into his arms. I told them, she cried into his chest. I told them you didn't do it. He held her tight, his voice breaking. You did more than tell them, Peanut. You saved me. Oh. For a long time, neither of them moved. The world outside the courtroom might as well not have existed. All that mattered was the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against his. When they finally stood, Judge Whitmore was smiling faintly from the bench. Miss Collins, he said, adjusting his glasses. The justice system is built on truth, and sometimes it takes the smallest voice to remind us what that means. Harper smiled shyly, cheeks flushed. Thank you, Your Honor. M? Outside, the afternoon sun spilled across the courthouse steps like warm honey. The fog had lifted, revealing the gentle blue of the mountains in the distance. Reporters called out questions, flashes popping, but Ethan ignored them all. He just stood there, breathing the free air, his hand wrapped around his daughter's. Tommy Keller joined them, tucking his briefcase under one arm. "You two just made half the county cry in there," he said, smiling.
You did good, Harper. Real good.
Thank you, Mr. Keller, she said, trying not to grin too wide.
You believed me.
He shook his head. No, kiddo, you believed first. That's what made the difference. Clara hurried down the steps to meet them, her scarf fluttering in the wind. She pulled them both into a hug, laughing and crying all at once. I knew it! I knew the truth would come out! For the first time in months, Ethan's laughter joined hers deep, weary, but alive. Guess we owe you a new picture, Peanut, he said, looking down at Harper. She grinned up at him. At Hillcrest Diner? Where else? The four of them walked together through downtown Asheville, the streets glowing in the golden hour. The city was alive with the soft chatter of cafe doors, the smell of roasted coffee and cinnamon drifting from open windows. People turned and smiled as they passed strangers who'd read the headlines or heard the whispers, but no one said a word. They stopped at a crosswalk near Maple Street. Ethan looked up at the courthouse tower behind them, then down at his daughter beside him. You know, he said quietly, I used to think the world was built on what we earn. Now I know it's built on who we believe. Harper squeezed his hand. You mean, like family? He smiled. Exactly like that. The light changed. They crossed together, step by step, as the last of the day's sunlight painted their shadows long across the street, father and daughter side by side again. When they reached the diner, Mr. Boyd was waiting by the door. Well, look who the world finally got right, he said, holding the door open. Ethan chuckled. Couldn't have done it without your camera. Mr. Boyd winked at Harper. Nah, couldn't have done it without her. The bell above the door chimed softly as they entered, the scent of syrup and warm bread filling the air. Their old booth was still there, a little worn, a little crooked, but just right. Ethan slid into the seat, watching Harper trace her finger along the table's edge. For the first time in a long time, there was peace in her small, tired eyes. 2 pancakes and a coffee? Mr. Boyd asked, pen poised. Ethan smiled. Make it 2 of each. We've got something to celebrate. The pancakes came out steaming, golden and soft, just like the morning that had started it all. Harper poured syrup over hers, humming quietly as Ethan stirred his coffee. For a while, they didn't speak. The clatter of dishes and the low hum of conversation filled the air, simple, ordinary sounds that suddenly felt sacred. Ethan leaned back, exhaling. You know, Peanut, he said softly, I used to think freedom was about walking wherever you want, but it's not. It's being able to look someone you love in the eye and not feel ashamed. Harper looked up at him, smiling. Then you're free now, he chuckled, eyes glistening. Thanks to you. Mr. Boyd brought over the check, but instead of handing it to Ethan, he slipped a small envelope toward Harper. Found this in your dad's briefcase after the trial, he said. Figured it was meant for you. Inside was a note in Ethan's handwriting. If you ever doubt yourself, remember, courage is just love that refuses to quit. Harper's lips trembled into a smile. You wrote this before you went to court? Ethan nodded. Didn't know if I'd see you again, but I knew you'd keep believing. She folded the paper and tucked it into her notebook beside the photos, the story of how truth had found its voice. When they left the diner, the sky was glowing pink over the Blue Ridge peaks. Harper slipped her hand into her father's and looked up. Can we take a new picture? He grinned. This time, let's make it one worth keeping forever. The camera clicked, and in that frozen frame, a father and daughter smiled beneath the golden light, surrounded by the quiet grace of second chances. October melted slowly into November, and the maples that lined Maple Street turned from gold to copper before giving in to winter's chill. Life in Asheville moved on slower now. Quieter, but inside the little Collins home, every morning felt like a new beginning. Ethan had gone back to work, not at Blue Ridge Financial, but at a small accounting firm nearby. Smaller place, bigger heart, he told Harper with a smile. He still wore the same tie each morning, but now he came home before sunset, always in time for dinner, always with stories. Harper had started writing again. Her notebook, once filled with courtroom notes and scraps of fear, now bloomed with short stories. She wrote about truth, kindness, and the courage to stand up even when your voice shakes. One of them she titled, The Pancake Promise. Every Saturday morning, they returned to Hillcrest Diner. Mr. Boyd always had their booth ready and 2 pancakes already sizzling on the griddle. Sometimes Clara joined them, bringing homemade jam. Sometimes Tommy Keller stopped by just to share coffee and laugh about the day justice was served with syrup. One quiet evening, as golden light filtered through the window, Harper sat at the table with a pen in hand. "I want to write thank you letters," she said. "To who, sweetheart?" Ethan asked. "To everyone who believed and even the ones who didn't," she said thoughtfully. "Because if they hadn't doubted, I wouldn't have learned how to speak." Ethan smiled, watching her fold each note carefully. The first was for Judge Whitmore. "Thank you for listening even when I was small." The next for Mr. Boyd. "Thank you for keeping pictures of good people." The third for Mr. Keller. "Thank you for believing the smallest voice could matter." She hesitated before writing the last one to Richard Stone. After a long pause, she wrote, "I hope you find peace too. Everyone deserves another chance." Ethan watched her silently, his chest tightening with pride. "That's a brave thing to write," he said. Harper nodded. "You said forgiveness is freedom, right?" "I did," he whispered. That night, they walked together to the old mailbox on the corner. The air smelled like pine and wood smoke. Harper stood on tiptoe to slip the letters inside, then looked up at the star-salted sky. "Do you think people change, Daddy?" Ethan smiled softly. "I think the good ones already started trying." They walked home under the amber glow of the streetlights, the sound of dry leaves crackling underfoot, a quiet rhythm of life moving forward. A week later, a small envelope arrived in their mailbox plain, with no return address. Harper turned it over in her hands, frowning. "It's for me," she said softly, recognizing her name in careful handwriting. She opened it at the table, while Ethan read the newspaper beside her. Inside was a single page. "Dear Harper, you don't know how much your letter meant. I did terrible things, and I'll live with that. But your kindness reminded me that even broken people can try again. I've started helping at the shelter downtown. Maybe that's a place to begin. Richard Stone." Harper read it twice, then smiled faintly. He wrote back. Ethan lowered the paper. "Did he?" She nodded. "He said he's trying to change." Ethan's eyes softened. "Then you gave him the first step." "Huh?" They sat in silence for a while, watching the sunlight slide across the floorboards. Outside, a few leaves danced down from the maples, catching in the breeze. Harper folded the letter and placed it inside her notebook, between the photos and the diner receipt. The story of their family was there now, not just the pain, but the proof that love and truth had found their way home. Later, as evening settled over the Blue Ridge, she curled against her father's side on the porch swing. The air smelled faintly of rain and wood smoke. "Daddy," she whispered, "do you think we'll always remember?" Ethan smiled, brushing her hair back. "I think some stories never stop being told." And as the wind rustled through the trees, the world felt full again, not perfect, not easy, but whole. Snow had fallen through the night, blanketing Asheville in quiet silver. The streets were hushed, and the air held that soft stillness that only comes after forgiveness, as if even the wind knew when to be gentle. Inside the Collins home on Maple Street, the morning light spilled through gauzy curtains, landing on the kitchen table where 2 mugs of cocoa steamed beside a half-finished puzzle. Harper sat curled in her chair, hair messy from sleep, drawing in her notebook. Across from her, Ethan poured syrup over a stack of pancakes, smiling at the sight of her little doodles, a father, a daughter, a diner, and a heart drawn between them. "Working on another masterpiece?" he asked, taking a sip of coffee. She grinned. "It's not a drawing, it's a story. About how sometimes, when you lose everything, that's when you find what really matters." Ethan leaned back, studying her for a long moment. "You've got your mother's way with words." Harper shrugged, blushing. "Maybe, but I think I got your stubbornness." He laughed softly, the kind of laugh that comes from relief, not amusement. "That you did, Peanut." The radio hummed in the background, an old tune from the 60s, while the smell of cinnamon and butter filled the house. It had been 3 months since the trial, 3 months since Ethan had walked free, but the memory of those days hadn't faded. Freedom had its own kind of weight. Lighter, yes, but it pressed on the heart in a different way. Everywhere they went, people recognized them now. Some stopped to shake Ethan's hand. Others simply nodded in quiet respect. Harper didn't mind the stares. She was proud. Her dad had always been her hero, and now the world finally knew why. After breakfast, Ethan took his coat from the hook. "Come on," he said. "Let's go for a walk before the snow melts." The town was dressed for Christmas, wreaths on lampposts, garlands along the shop windows. The Blue Ridge peaks loomed soft and pale in the distance. Harper's boots crunched in the snow beside her father's heavier steps. They passed the courthouse, its tall columns glistening with frost. Harper slowed down, staring up at it. "Do you think Judge Whitmore still remembers us?" she asked. Ethan smiled. "I think he remembers your courage more than anything." Harper's eyes sparkled. "Do you think he ever got my letter?" "Oh, I'm sure he did." He bent down and brushed snow from her shoulder. "You've got a way of leaving an impression." They turned onto Hillcrest Avenue, where the diner's neon sign flickered against the winter sky. Inside, the warmth hit them like an embrace. Mr. Boyd waved from behind the counter, apron dusted with flour. "Thought you two might show up," he said with a grin. "Got your booth ready. Extra syrup, just how you like it." Harper slid into her usual seat, cheeks rosy from the cold. The diner smelled of coffee, sugar, and nostalgia. On the wall above the counter hung dozens of Polaroid photos, birthday parties, anniversaries, Sunday breakfasts. And right in the center, framed in a small wooden border, was theirs, Ethan and Harper Collins, October 8th. The one that had changed everything. Mr. Boyd set 2 plates in front of them. "So, what's the plan for today? Saving the world again?" Harper laughed. "Not today. Today we're just eating pancakes." He winked. "Good plan." As they ate, sunlight spilled through the window, painting golden lines across the table. Harper looked out at the snow, lost in thought. "Daddy," she said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "When they took you away that morning, were you scared?" Ethan's fork paused halfway. He looked down at his hands, the same ones that had once trembled behind cold steel cuffs, and exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he said at last. "I was scared I'd never see you again. Scared that the truth wouldn't be enough." Harper studied him for a moment, then reached across the table and took his hand. "But it was enough." He nodded, eyes misting. "Because you believed it was." The bell over the door jingled, and a gust of winter air swept through. A few customers turned to look, but Harper stayed focused on her father. In that moment, she understood something she hadn't before, that courage wasn't about being unafraid. It was about loving someone enough to keep standing, even when the world called you small. Ethan smiled at her, as if he could read her thoughts. "You know," he said softly, "some people say life is about moving on, but I think it's about moving with the people we love, with the memories that made us." Harper tilted her head. "So we carry them?" He nodded. "Everywhere. And..." She leaned her chin on her palm, smiling. "Then I'll never be lost." Outside, the snow kept falling slow, steady, endless. Outside, the snow fell thicker now, the world muffled in white. The diner windows glowed warm against the pale day, and, inside that small booth, time seemed to stand still. Harper rested her chin on her folded arms, watching the snow drift down. Ethan studied her for a moment, then reached into his coat pocket. "I've got something for you too," he said. From the pocket he pulled out a small velvet box. Harper blinked. "Is that?" "Open it." Inside lay a thin silver chain, simple but elegant, with a tiny heart-shaped pendant. Etched across it, in his handwriting, were the same words she had once written for him. "Forever begins here." Her eyes widened, and for a second she couldn't speak. You put it on the necklace?" He nodded. "So you'd remember that every day's a new start, no matter what came before." Harper threw her arms around his neck. "You're the best dad in the world." He laughed, voice thick with feeling. "And you're the bravest girl I've ever known." Mr. Boyd passed their table, camera in hand. "I see another moment worth keeping," he said with a wink. "Go ahead," Ethan said, smiling. One last picture for the wall. The flash went off soft, golden, capturing them mid-laugh. The pendant catching the light. The snow blurred in the window behind them. Later, when they stepped back outside, the world felt new. Snowflakes brushed their coats, melting as they touched. Harper slipped her gloved hand into her father's, her laughter echoing softly down Maple Street. They walked past the courthouse where truth had triumphed, past the mailbox where her letters had gone out to the world, and turned toward home, the little house with its warm porch light and quiet promise. On the porch, Ethan stopped and looked out across the valley. The mountains stood dark and steady against the evening sky. "You know," he said, "I used to think that story we lived through was about me, about what I lost, or what I got back. But it wasn't." Harper tilted her head. "Then what was it about?" He smiled down at her. "About a little girl who taught everyone how to listen." Harper blushed, pretending to roll her eyes, but she couldn't hide her grin. "You're just saying that because I found the picture?" "No," he said softly, "because you found the truth." They stepped inside, the scent of pine and cinnamon filling the air. On the mantel above the fireplace stood 2 framed photos, the first from that morning at the diner months ago, and the new one from today. In both, they were smiling, framed by light, as if time itself had chosen to forgive. Harper curled up on the couch with her notebook and wrote one last line. "The truth doesn't hide, it waits for someone brave enough to find it." She set the pen down, watching the fire crackle, the snow falling quietly outside. Ethan placed the new photo beside the old one and whispered, "Forever begins here." And this time, it wasn't just a promise, it was the truth. As the snow settled over the Blue Ridge Mountains, peace finally returned to the little Collins home. A father once accused, and a daughter who never stopped believing, found their way back to each other not through luck, but through love, truth, and the quiet courage to forgive. Sometimes the smallest hands carry the greatest hope. Harper's voice reminded us that kindness and faith can rebuild what fear once destroyed. Ethan learned that redemption isn't bought, it's lived, one honest choice at a time. Unconditional love can change any destiny. Everyone deserves a home, a chance to begin again, and someone who believes in them. True happiness isn't about wealth, but about the warmth around a dinner table and the peace that follows forgiveness. Like a porch light glowing through the Carolina night, even one simple act of kindness can lead us through the darkest roads. If this story touched your heart, type 1-inch, the comments. If there's something you'd change or share, press 0. Your thoughts matter here. And wherever you are tonight, may your heart stay warm, your home stay kind, and may your own forever begin right there.